Hello and welcome to a new video. Sitting in a slightly different area because I don't want to sit on the ground in front of my shelf, but I thought I would go through my Goodreads year in books with you real quick and tell you all the books I read in 2025. It's a little bit late. It is January 10th when I'm filming this, but you know, that's okay. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into my year in books. So over 2025, I read 34,494 pages and I read 102 books. So awesome. My shortest book was Becoming the Dark Prince by Carrie Maniscalco, which was 64 pages. That was a novella in the Capturing the Devil, in between Capturing the Devil and the Houdini one, I think. Either way, it's in the Stalking Jack the Ripper series. My longest book was The Lost Hero by Rick Riordan, which is 576 pages. I had no idea that book was that long. I listened to the audiobook and greatly enjoyed doing that reread. My average book length in 2025 was 338 pages, which sounds about right. My most shelved was I did a reread of Twilight. There are, I believe that says 9 million people who have also shelved that book. I listened to that audio on a drive to California, so loved that. Kind of surprisingly, least shelved is this Stranger Things comic. Only 133 people have shelved this book. I would not have guessed that, but it was a great comic, actually. I really enjoyed it. My average rating is 4.8 stars. I rate most things fairly high. I don't think it's really worth my time to give things a low rating. And then the highest rated book that I read was Heartstopper Volume 4. Interestingly, the average is 4.56. Interesting that it's Volume 4 specifically. I mean, I love all of Heartstopper and I'm always thinking about doing a reread. My first review of the year was This Blood That Burns Us by S.L. Coakley. I don't remember if this is book 1, 2, or 3, and I think it's book 2, I'm not sure. It might be book 1. I don't know. My review that I wrote, I have been pretty good about writing reviews this year, not on every book, but on a lot of them. And I typically, what I do is split it up in pros and cons. So my pros for this book, literally everything: drama, romance, vampires, cutesy banter, an absolute insane twist ending. My cons were that the conflict got slightly repetitive, but it came together in the end. And I stand by that. I liked those books. Oh, so I think that is book 1. And so let me start reading you all of the books that I read this year. For some reason, I thought usually it would show you the star rating for all of them, but I'm not seeing that, so I guess we'll just go through the list. I read This Blood That Burns Us by S.L. Coakley, This Blood That Breaks Us, and This Blood That Bonds Us. That's that series together. I read City of Bones, City of Ashes, and City of Glass by Cassandra Clare. I read the brand new Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros, which was crazy. I read The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent, which was good. Not an all-time favorite, but it was good. I read Flawless by Elsie Silver. Then I went on a little Tessa Bailey binge. I read Fangirl Down, The Au Pair Affair, and Dream Girl Drama. Loved all of those. I read Make Your Play by Callie Mel. Really enjoyed that one. I read Heartless by Elsie Silver. Then I did continued a reread of this series. I read Hunting Prince Dracula, Becoming the Dark Prince, Escape from Houdini, and Capturing the Devil by Carrie Maniscalco. Stand by those being some of the best books ever written. I read A Legend in the Baking by Jamie Wesley. I did a reread of Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. I don't even remember rereading that, but I do love that book. I read The Fae King's Assassin by Alicia Klepecki. I didn't like that book. I read Can't Spell Treason Without T by Rebecca Thorne. One of my top books of the year, Like Real People Do by E.L. Massey. I am already thinking about doing a reread of that. I read Bride by Allie Hazelwood. So fun. I read 9 Month Contract by Amy Dawes. The sequel to the E.L. Massey book, I read Like You've Nothing Left to Prove. I read An Absolute Bloody Disaster by Lindsay Clement, who is an author I know on Instagram. That was a really fun book. I read Unsteady by Peyton Corinne. I read The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren. I read Dungeons and Drama and Dating and Dragons by Christy Boyce. I read Burnout by Rebecca Genshak, which was an interesting premise, but not an all-time favorite. I read We Were Dreamers by Simu Liu, which I think is my only nonfiction of the year. I listened to this audiobook while I was painting the bathroom. I read Ready or Not by Cara Bastone. Loved that book. I read a bunch of Moon Knight comics. The Midnight Mission, Too Tough to Die, Halfway to Sanity, Road to Ruin, The Last Days of Moon Knights, and New Moon, and It's Alive. Fantastic story arc, really enjoyed it. It's too small for me to see who the author is in these pictures. I read Mr. Hockey by Leah Riley. I read Head Coach by Leah Riley in Virgin Territory. Enjoyed all of those. Very short hockey. I don't think they're quite novellas, but they're very short books. I read All Dead Girls Lie by Piper L. White, which was a really fun mystery. I read Not in Love by Allie Hazelwood. Enjoyed that. Did my Twilight reread. Is there a single year in which I don't reread Twilight? I don't know. I reread the Infernal Devices series. I read Clockwork Angel, Clockwork Prince, and Clockwork Princess by Cassandra Clare, which always kills me. I read You Should Be So Lucky by Kat Sebastian. That was a really lovely historical romance. I read Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins, which was one of my best books of the year. I read A Study in Scarlet Women by Sherry Thomas, as well as A Conspiracy in Belgravia by Sarah Thomas, which is this Charlotte Holmes retelling series, which I really, really love. By Elsie Silver, I read Powerless, Reckless, and Hopeless. I don't remember which one is my favorite, to be honest, because all the names are so similar, I can never remember which one is which. I read Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez, which was a very sweet romance. A little sad, but good. I read Skating the Blue Line by Jocelyn Soto. It was a pretty forgettable book. I don't really remember what it was about. I read City of Fallen Angels by Cassandra Clare, and City of Lost Souls. And then I have not finished my reread of that series now. I read Room for Two by Lana Ferguson it was like a Spotify audiobook. It was okay. It was good. I read, there was something specific that I the main character was, I believe, in school to be a nurse practitioner, but she wasn't a nurse. And so I was just so frustrated the whole book, where I'm like, she keeps talking about going to NP school, but she's not a nurse. You can't just become a nurse practitioner without being a nurse first. So I was annoyed. But anyway, I read Pumpkin Spice Peril by Jen McKinley, and For Better or Worse, from that series as well. I read It Happened on a Sunday by Tracy Wolff. That was a new release this year that I really enjoyed. I read There's Pumpkin About You by Athena Carstairs. That's a book I picked out for my book club book, and it was not great. Sorry guys, I picked that book. I read The Hollow of Fear by Sherry Thomas, again in the Charlotte Holmes series. Love it. Then I had myself a graphic novel readathon. So I read Taproot by Keezy Young. I read Washington's Gay General by Josh Trujillo. I read all 5 volumes of Heartstopper again. I read some Stranger Things comics, including I don't think this one actually has a name. It's just Volume 1 and Volume 2 Stranger Things comics, and Volume 3. I read the Nick and Charlie novella by Alice Osman, and then I have discovered my absolute gem, Rachel Reed. I read Game Changer and Heated Rivalry, and Tough Guy. The first two are 2 of my favorite books of all time now. I also read Pumpkin Spice and Everything Nice. That was a very cute YA novel, if not a little melodramatic, but that's okay. I read Hot for Slayer by Allie Hazelwood, which I think is criminally underrated, and I think needs to become a full-length novel, if not a full series. It was so good. I read It Happened One Fight by Maureen Lee Lanker. That was a really interesting historical romance in a time period that doesn't get a lot of shine when it comes to historical romance. It took place in the 1930s. I read Sleepless at Midnight by Jackie D'Alessandro, which I think is my only true historical romance of the year, which is unfortunate because I love that genre. I need to read more historical romance this year. I read Strawberried Alive by Jim McKinley, Sugar Plum Poisoned, and Fondant Fumble, finishing out what is currently published of that series. I'm just anxiously awaiting for the next book to come out. Have no idea when that's going to happen though. I read The Art of Theft by Sherry Thomas, another one that I really loved. Same Time Next Year by Tessa Bailey. Didn't actually love that one that much. Another Stranger Things comic. This was Stranger Things mixed with Dungeons and Dragons, called The Rise of Hellfire, which was like a look into a campaign they might have played, and like Eddie's, like his introduction to Dungeons and Dragons and getting into it. It was really good. I read Common Goal by Rachel Reed, if I didn't already say that one. I read The Lost Hero by Rick Riordan. And then I read volumes, 1 through 5 of Lore Olympus. Very much enjoyed that. I'm looking forward to continuing to read that series this year and get caught up. Actually, I also read volume 6? So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I read 1 through 6, sorry. I read A Heart for Christmas by Sophie Jomain, which was like an advent calendar book, which was so fun. Just for the novelty of it, it was such a fun idea. And then I read The Son of Neptune by Rick Riordan, which I forgot how much I loved my Frank and Hazel. They are just so precious. Hazel especially. That is the reminder for me to not forget to bring a present with me today. And then I lastly read Good Spirits by B.K. Borson. So I really enjoyed that one. Towards the end of the year, I was not writing reviews because I was so desperately trying to make my Goodreads goal. I was like, I don't have time for this. So my last review is actually the one I wrote for Common Goal. That one took me the longest. So I wrote, I'm finally done with this one. This book still has Rachel Reed's iconic and magical charm, but these characters just felt like something was missing to me. It being an age gap romance already was not my thing. That's not my favorite trope. If not, it's one of my least favorite tropes. And then there was just something in the chemistry lacking for me. It wasn't an all-consuming read like the other books have been, and like this next one that I'm on is. It's still good, but it just wasn't as great, and I did feel the ending was a little bit rushed. I thought his big decision he made in the end, I was like, oh, I feel like we should have either been privy to that thought process earlier in the book, or he should have spent more time thinking about that decision. But anyway, that is my year in books. I read a lot of books I loved, but I also read some books I didn't love. So my goal in 2026 is to read more books that I love. But I hope you enjoyed. Like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.